Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, and a mosque full to overflowing. At times of trouble, people turn to prayer, and these are troubled times. The sermon is an angry one, full of outrage over the plight of Palestinians in Gaza and calling for Israel's destruction. It pours easily into the streets, turning into a pro-Hamas rally, begging the question, is support for the militant group in charge of Gaza only growing? Your movement, Hamas, they're shouting. Your army, Al-Qassam. The people want the Qassam brigades. That's the Hamas military wing behind the brutal October 7th attacks that killed more than 1,400 Israelis. Hamza, 28, is one of the few demonstrators willing to speak to us on camera, but he's evasive about directly voicing support for Hamas. I was praying, and then I saw a demonstration, he says, and it's only natural that I joined it. Whatever was chanted at the demonstration is the message. As Israel continues a war it says is aimed at Hamas, few here accept that distinction, given the number of Palestinian civilians dying.
Bombing women and children, bombing hospitals, killing the Palestinian people, and the identity is not about chasing a specific party. It's about chasing the entire people of Palestine.
Sabri Saidam is a senior leader with Fatah, the secular party that runs the West Bank's Palestinian Authority and Hamas's long-term political rival. He's marching for an end to Israeli attacks in Gaza, not in support of Hamas, but he does say it's time for Palestinian unity.
All Palestinian factions have to come together and turn to the international community and say enough is enough. Had this conflict been resolved decades ago, we would not have seen the wars, successive wars that we have seen over the years that have passed.
The creation of the Palestinian Authority with civil control over some parts of the West Bank was an essential part of the 1990s Oslo Peace Accords, signed on to by the then Fatah leader Yasser Arafat. But the failure of that peace to materialize has left support for the PA and its Fatah leadership as singed as Arafat's mural, seen as weak in the face of an Israeli occupation now in its 56th year. Gaza's Hamas leaders clearly see space to try and extend their influence here. This is pro-Hamas graffiti. It's all along this street, which is in the center of Ramallah, which is, of course, headquarters for the Palestinian Authority. It wasn't here before October 7th. Support for Hamas, which doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist and is considered a terrorist organization by several Western governments, including Canada, isn't new in the West Bank. Israel regularly jails its supporters, and even before October 7th, the army had stepped up its raids on armed Palestinian factions in militant strongholds like Jenin. In the high hills north of Ramallah, sleepy-looking villages dot the landscape. Deir Hassana is centuries old and seemingly slow of pace. 2 weeks ago, Israeli soldiers raided the home of Fadia Barghouti in the middle of the night, arresting her son, Basil.
They have never been as violent. They haven't knocked or rang the bell. The only thing they started is smashing the glass.
Barghouti's husband, Mahmoud, an accountant who works for the PA's Department of Religious Affairs, has been in administrative detention in an Israeli jail for 13 months now. Not the first time he's been held without charge for supporting Hamas. She believes her son was arrested for backing a Hamas-linked party in student elections last spring. She says an Israeli intelligence officer threatened them.
He put his nose on my nose, his eyes in my eyes, and he told me, "You are all Hamas. You will all pay the price of what happened on the 7th of October. They destroyed everything.
Barghouti believes support for Hamas stems from the failure of the peace process and those naive enough to believe it could protect Palestinian rights.
This world respects strong people, and you can't raise your voice, and this world can't hear you until you're strong. You have something, power in your hand. When Palestinians were weak, they smashed us. I think resistance gave Palestinians a sense of dignity and a sense of power.
Navigating West Bank roads has never been easy for Palestinians, a patchwork grid of Israeli army checkpoints and access roads for Jewish settlers whose presence across the occupied territories continues to grow, despite condemnation from much of the international community. Violence towards Palestinians by ultranationalist settlers has surged in the wake of the Hamas attack, condemned by the White House. The Palestinian village of Kusra lies in the shadow of a settlement on one side and an outpost on the other, often manned by hardline settlers.
Margaret.
19-year-old Rabia Odeh and her mother were home when Jewish settlers attacked their house on the edge of Kusra 4 days after the Hamas assault.
My brother tried to tell them we don't any problems, but they suddenly attack us without anything. We don't take any rocks or stones and throw about him.
Relatives and neighbors answered their calls for help. This video shows settlers opening fire. Odeh's brother Awad was injured. 4 other Palestinians were killed. Now Odeh's family is too frightened to spend nights here. When they come in the day to clean up, they have their defenses ready. Settler violence may have spiked recently, but it's also not new. Odeh's father was killed during a confrontation with settlers 7 years ago now. Israel's current government includes extremist politicians who favor annexing the West Bank. Combined with current events, it leaves little room on the horizon for Palestinian hopes of statehood, more frayed than ever before. Mudar Kassis heads Birzeit University's Human Rights Program. He says a more radical landscape may well emerge from it all, not necessarily what most Palestinians want.
But what is relevant eventually for the Palestinians is that what will make them free. Not Hamas, not the Palestinian Authority, not Fatah, not the third way, not the left, not the right. Whatever gives them the hope of freedom is what will get relevance for Palestinians.